You are now entering the world of a movie review. A world full of drama, joy, ridicule, movie spoilers, unpopular opinions, and adult humor for as far as the eye can see. Welcome to an evening at the movies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to your your favorite, I would hope, movie-based podcast. This is an evening at the movies. Um, so, if you're a first-time listener, just wanted to let you know this is the podcast where we eat the stale popcorn, we drink the watered-down sodas, and we discuss all of our favorite movies and why we love them. Sometimes it's a new movie, sometimes it's eh, sometimes it's a classic, but I digress. Before we get to the revelation as to what we're talking about today, though, I have a very special guest with me today, making her an evening at the movies debut. And I'm going to literally slap myself in the face right now because I didn't do it. And mm, I'm generally not this forgetful to do it, but I'm going to rip the band aid off and try and do it blindly. So, for the first time on the episode, we are joined by Sarah Callen.
You did it!
Yay!
Yes, good job. I'm impressed.
I
A lot of people don't get it right the first time. You did great.
I was sitting there after I hit the play button for the video intro, and I'm like, "Oh no, I forgot." And then I'm
You did
like
it.
looking at it, and I'm like, "Well, it doesn't look that complicated, but I did have somebody on last month where their last name looked not that complicated, and then I went through the same thing, and I'm like, so how do you pronounce your?" And they're like, and they pronounced it, and I'm like, totally not what I would have guessed.
Yep. Yep. But you
So
did it. You nailed it. First try. Well done.
stuck the landing.
You did. 10 out of 10.
So Sarah Callen,
Mhm.
and would you like to further introduce yourself and um, talk about what it is that you do out in the internet world?
Yeah, my name is Sarah, and I am one of the co-hosts of a movie podcast called Movies Us. And so every week we just talk about a different movie. And so love movies. Happy to be here. Happy to make new friends who also love movies. So this is going to be a great time.
So I know I said in the intro that it should be everybody's favorite movie. Sarah's show is just as good as an evening at the movies too. So,
We can be
but
tied for favorites.
yes, there's always room at the top for more than one number
Yes.
one. So, um, for those of you who actually don't know, I actually met Sarah through the fact that um, one of the places that we distribute an evening at the movies is through app called Good Pods, and Sarah has actually given poor English given an evening at the movies several 5-star ratings in the past. So I happened to comment back, and we started talking, and everything started falling into place.
Yeah.
And I checked out a few of her episodes and invited her on the show, and she came up with some ideas, and thus led us to picking the movie that we're going to be discussing today. One of the greatest movies of all time, I might add. But I will save that rest of that description for the review portion of the show. But it is Alfred Hitchcock. It is a but I've seen enough. Isn't a whole lot bad that Hitchcock has done, but we've already discussed the Psycho, so we're not going to go back down that road. But we will be discussing a actually interesting topic, which is Rear Window. So, for those that don't know, Rear Window released on, oh God, this movie is old, August 4th, 1954.
Yeah, it's been a
Like,
minute.
August 4th will be, what, 70 years since this movie came out?
Wow. That's wild. Man, and I mean, we'll talk about how good it is, but it's still so good almost 70 years later. It's incredible.
Almost, literally almost 70 years later. And I, I will say this is kind of sort of a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler. This movie still stands up to the test of time,
Mhm. Yeah.
almost in every essence of that very definition.
Yep.
So, but like I said, Alfred Hitchcock directed, was released by Paramount Pictures, had a $1 million budget. I wonder how much of that went to Jimmy Stewart, but it made 37 million at the box office. So in 1954, for those of you who don't, I'm not going to do the math because I suck at math, but $37 million in 1954
Wow.
is a lot of money. I mean,
Yes.
I would be happy in today's standards to make a movie and make $37 million.
Yeah.
But well, no, probably not because it probably costs a lot more to make a movie now. Like $37 million is like, yeah,
It's chump change today, which is crazy.
yeah. For $37 million today, you'd probably have a movie that looks like the original, like OG 1960s Star Trek TV show.
Mhm.
Which, again, special effects not great, but we're not discussing that science fiction. We're
Not
discussing,
today.
no, not today. But as far as, okay, so Rotten Tomatoes. Everybody knows we give whoever's on the show a chance to guess and see what they think the Rotten Tomato score is for the particular movie we're discussing. And Sarah is no different. She's going to get put on the hot seat as well. So, would you like to wager a guess as to what you think the Rotten Tomato score is for Rear Window?
Uh, I am going to guess that it's 76.
Yeah, you weren't even close.
I figured that I wouldn't be. I never know with Rotten Tomatoes because sometimes they're right and sometimes they're really, really wrong.
This time, they're really, really right.
Great. Love it.
So, the tomato meter has the movie at 98%,
Nice. Good.
and the audience is almost just as correct. They have 95%. So, also, the movie did happened to win a couple of awards during its run. 1954, it won National Board of Review Award, Best Actress for Grace Kelly. 1955, the New York Film Critics Circle, Best Actress again for Grace Kelly. 1955, Edgar Allan Poe Award, Best Motion Picture Screenplay. And then in 1997, it was inducted into the National Film Registry. So lots of greatness. Didn't necessarily win the classic awards
Mhm.
that everybody factors into it, but at the same time, it still won awards, which it is very deserving of because now we're going to get into the discussion portion of the show, which now we're going to get take the gloves off and get into it. So, I, mm, I'll go with a generic question to start off and get things rolling. What is it about the movie that you fell in love with?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about this movie is just the fact that it happens in one location. Uh, I think my one of my other favorite Hitchcock films, which is kind of like a middling Hitchcock, is Dial M for Murder, which is similarly in one location, and I just love the way that he so effectively uses that single location to create so much tension. And there are certain moments, especially toward the end of Rear Window, where you feel that sense of being trapped with Jeffries. But you don't feel
Yes.
that for the entire movie. So the way that he is able to use the cinematography and his different camera angles to at times make it feel like expansive, and then at other times make it feel so constricting and restrictive while you're still stuck in the same room basically for the entire movie is just fascinating to me.
Well, and a major plot point of all of that too is the fact that literally Jeffries has a broken left leg,
Mhm. Yep.
and he's in a wheelchair.
Yep.
So, I mean, the running joke at the beginning of the movie is the insurance nurse that comes
Yep.
in and sees him every day. She's always at the end of her visit, you probably should get out of your chair and try and sleep in, your bed
Yeah.
instead of sleeping in your chair all the time. And he's all like, yeah, blowing her off and everything. But he's also slowly going down this road of becoming obsessed with, I guess the politically correct way would be people watching out of his
Mhm.
living room window.
Yep.
But okay, you kind of can't call it people watching and have an effective amount of tension that you need for this
Yes.
story.
Yeah.
So you basically just have to rip the damn band-aid off and say he's a peeping tom. Not to the extent, obviously, because you couldn't show things back then that you could by today's standards. But, you know, if this was to take place in like today's cinema, you could go to a whole different level of creepy and all of that Hitchcock couldn't go to. I mean, Hitchcock had to kind of sort of play around with it and
Mhm.
see how far he could push the envelope, like
Yep.
he did with Psycho,
Yeah.
because in a lot of ways, he couldn't go explicitly where he wanted to go with the storyline for that, but he could try and get as close to that edge as he could. And because, I mean, let's be honest, not to go down a whole different rabbit hole being Psycho, but the fact of the multiple personality disorder, cross dressing, all of that probably was not a subject that was approached very much back in the cinemas
Yeah.
back then.
Yep.
So that was definitely something that Hitchcock um, was a true master of, and you get a sense of that in movies like Psycho or Rear Window, or you know, uh, I again, I like I said before we got started, I have not seen a bad Hitchcock movie. So, I mean, Vertigo, classic. The Birds, classic. Dial M for Murder, classic. Strangers on a Train, classic. All of which, encompass that whole creative vision that is the brain of Alfred Hitchcock, and how he takes a blank canvas and paints a masterpiece on that canvas.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's incredible. Like, I recently watched, The 39 Steps for the first time, and that's kind of like a middling Hitchcock movie, but
mhm.
it's still so good. It's like, how is your, like, middle grade movie this killer? And I'm just amazed that he was able to create such incredible movies just year after year after year that still hold up all these years later. It's incredible because Rear Window is thrilling, and it was made
Yeah,
almost 70 years ago.
yeah, no, that totally shocks me because, like, not that, great movies weren't made back then, because I I'm assuming you have a depth of knowledge almost as great as me when it comes to movies, and I've seen a lot of great movies, and you know, not all of them came from present day. Some of them came
Mhm.
from the '90s, some of them
Yeah.
came from the '80s, some of them came from the '70s, '60s, '50s, whatever.
Yep.
And you know, Rear Window falls smack dab right in the middle of that category. So, um, I think the one thing that baffled me the most when I was actually doing some of my research for, and I didn't write the number down, and I probably should have, but if you actually think about just how big Alfred Hitchcock's library of work is, I knew it was big, but I want to say I know of at least the fact that you can buy like a box set DVD collection on Amazon that's like $80 and it's got like 35 different movies in it. And
Wow.
and even that seems like a very low ball
Yeah.
number because that doesn't even encompass the fact that how long did his TV show run? Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
the guy was around television and cinema like there's no tomorrow. So,
Yep, and he left a massive mark too. It's
oh,
it's cool to go back and watch his movies and be able to trace some of the things that we see today as, like, commonplace to things that he pioneered.
I love the fact that I've been a movie fan long enough and I'm starting to get to be quote unquote, for lack of a better adjective, old enough that um, I'm starting to have been around long enough that like a new generation of directors and younger directors and stuff is coming up, and even like the 20-something-year-old, you know, directors that are just now cutting their teeth in Hollywood. If you were to sit down and ask a lot of them who influenced them, still you get many of them will one of the first people they list is Alfred Hitchcock.
Yep, absolutely.
So that to me says a lot because especially in this day and age where you have so much available at your hand at your fingertips. Um, one of the things that me and a couple of my friends who have different shows have learned in the last probably month is um, like the database of movies that came out just in like the 1980s alone is huge. But that is basically just like the single theater experience that you had back then. You venture into like the 90s where you start multiplexes are popping up left and right, and the amount of movies that started coming out of Hollywood, you know, literally
Yeah.
like hand over fist.
Yep.
And like the amount of movies that were produced in that decade, almost double and a half the amount of movies that came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, when you add in nowadays, you have movies, you have streaming, you
Mhm.
have all of it, you know, there's so much out there at your disposal. And
Yeah.
even like TV alone, TV compared to what it was when like you and I were kids,
Yep.
three
Night and
channels.
day. Yeah.
And if the president was on, your night was
Yep.
screwed. But no. So yeah, definitely with the wealth of talent that's out there, to have younger talent actually being able to latch onto the fact that we still respect and pay tribute to some of the greats like obviously Hitchcock, Spielberg, Coppola, you know, all the
Y and on and
amazing.
on and on.
Yeah. So I mean, Hollywood history is so long, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice to know that the true classic geniuses aren't ever getting forgotten about. Some days it may seem like they do, but
Yeah.
you know, um, So, um,
I can't hear you anymore. If you were just talking, I couldn't hear you.
okay.
Yep.
So eventually my headset cuts out like that. I don't know
Oh,
why.
fun.
Good times.
Yep,
At least
love
we
it.
at least we figured it out before there was like 10 minutes of dead air.
Yeah.
Um, so the question I asked was, what factor does point of view play in addressing the audience's voyeuristic role in society?
Yeah, I found that part of this super interesting, especially, on Movies and Us, we've been reviewing a lot of recent releases. So we just reviewed Eileen, and before that, we reviewed Saltburn, and both of those have this element of, like, voyeurism to it too, so it's kind of fascinating to see these, like, more modern takes on voyeurism contrasted with Rear Window in 1954. Um, and I'm just amazed at how relevant that topic is. I
Mhm.
mean, we're probably not staring out our windows at our neighbors all day, every day, like Jeffries was, but it's interesting our fascination with things like true crime and the way that like influencer culture has taken over and how we really enjoy being able to get these peeks into people's homes, and there's an element of that in this movie. His entertainment is watching his neighbors and getting to see what their lives are like, and then kind of extrapolating from there, giving them names, Miss Lonely Hearts, and all of that. So i
Mhm.
i love that this movie taps into something that we are still thinking about, and it shows up in our lives in a different way today than it did in Jeffrey's life. But it's still a very relevant topic today for us to think about how that, I don't know, voyeuristic streak shows up in our own society.
Well, because I'm not going to lie at all, voyeurism is still incredibly prevalent in today's society, especially with the fact that we all have these little devices
Yep.
in our hands that, and I'm not faulting technology for that, but with the way that these things are developing left and right, I'm not condoning it by any stretch of the imagination, but you probably could sit in your living room window and, you know, zoom in with your camera and
Mhm.
peek in at your across the street neighbor if you really wanted to.
Yeah.
We don't.
We don't wanna do that.
The
Don't do
prior
that.
the, pri- the prior statement is not condoned by anybody on an evening at the movies. Please
Nope.
do not ever go peeping at your neighbors from
Nope.
across the street or
Don't
next
do it.
door or wherever your neighbors may be.
Yeah.
But, obviously such a simplistic idea though. I'm sure thousands of people have thought about it, but realistically you could. Again, don't condone it. Please don't do it. And
Yeah.
if you do, don't say that I told you to do it because I'll deny it. Um, but yeah, I love the point of view factors that Hitchcock uses in this too, because even like there's moments in the movie where like you get to be in that point of view exactly where Jeffries is, where you have like the camera is like his binoculars looking
Yeah.
out the window across the courtyard,
Mhm.
whatever, into the other building, and it's like it's giving you a perspective that, because any director who is just half-assed in their job can take a damn camera, do a close-up on the actor in Jeffrey's apartment, and then okay, I need to turn around and look at what he's looking at, and then just literally turn the camera around and blah blah blah, blah shoot, back. and just flip back and forth like that. Where Hitchcock actually takes it and puts you in Jeffrey's wheelchair, and it's like he's turning you into that character. He's giving you a broken leg, he's confining you to a wheelchair, and then he's giving you the exact field of view that Jeffries is getting while looking through his binoculars.
And also
Ma,
yeah, it's so good. And, like, creating intrigue in us too,
mhm,
he doesn't show us the full picture. We get to know just as much as Jeffries does, and so we get these little glimpses into these people's lives that make us want to know more, and so, like, "Okay, what is this person doing now? What are they up to? What it motivates them?" And then, of course, there's the murder, and so we're like, "Okay, what happened to this woman? Did her husband actually kill her? Is Jeffries going crazy? Like, what's going on?" So I love the way that this story is pieced together to keep us constantly guessing, constantly wondering what's next, and constantly engaged in these characters, just like Jeffries is.
'cause and I won't try and put words in your mouth or in the other listeners' mouths as well, but, like, even going back this time and rewatching the movie for this episode, it's like I'm sitting here and I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of watching it for the first time so that you kinda get that new, uninterrupted viewing that a first time viewer gets. And I'm sitting here watching the movie, and it's like different things are building and building because you get like in the beginning of the movie where like the nurse and his girlfriend don't necessarily believe some of the stuff
Mhm.
that's coming out of his mouth.
Yep.
But then as the story unfolds and he finds more stuff and starts creating more of a story or revealing more of the actual story, however you want to look at it. I mean, literally up until the end, though, you're left questioning: is he just a wackadoo in the head,
Yep.
or is this legitimately happening? Because and certain things pop up to give you clues along the way. It's not like 15 minutes in and Hitchcock is going to let you know, okay, so this guy actually did do it, but you know, we're gonna screw around with you until the end. Oh no, he literally leads you down the road, back further, and then a little bit more, but back again. It's like two steps forward, three steps back for almost
Yep.
an hour and 45 minutes until finally it's like bam, right in the face. There you
Yep.
go. Which again is a classic Hitchcock trait because I mean I go back to obviously I don't assume everybody has seen everything that Hitchcock has done or most of but I know most people have seen Psycho, so I feel like Psycho is a good thing to base a comparison off of. But even like elements of that story, things unfold and two steps forward, three steps back, three steps forward, two steps back. And then at times you question, what you're seeing all the way up until, you know, pretty much literally you're in the fruit cellar with the sister, and he comes storming through the door wearing the wig and the dress, and it's like, okay, did not see that coming. But in a lot of ways, he gives you all of that information. He just doesn't give you the nice little pretty bow to tie it all up into one pretty little package,
Yep. Yep. And
kind of
I
like he does in Rear Window.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that master of suspense thing, he knows exactly what breadcrumbs to leave you so that you're still on the edge of your seat and questioning literally everything. And then finally at the end, it's like, okay, here's actually what happened. Here's the solution. It's so well paced, so well timed.
And if any of that is even off by in the slightest, it totally can ruin the entire trip for the entire
Yep.
audience.
Yep.
And one of the beautiful things about a Hitchcock movie is the fact that when you walk out of the theater after seeing a Hitchcock movie, he left you talking about the experience that you just sat through and spent 2 hours, enjoying. Again, I can't recall a whole lot of people having a whole lot of bad things to say about Hitchcock. So, there's that. Um, so with that statement being made, is there anything about this movie that felt kind of wonky to you or that you didn't particularly care for?
Yeah, I think the parts that I didn't love, but I mean, this is just like nitpicking stuff, like at the end,
It really is.
when Jeffries is hanging off the building and everybody's rushing around the courtyard, they just like sped up the film to make them move faster. It's those like little things that I'm like, you didn't need to do that. Like they could have just run and that would have been just as
Mhm.
effective. So it's those little things that I'm like, I get why you did it, but you didn't really need to. But I think, I mean, on the whole, this movie just works on so many different levels. It's really hard to nitpick flaws in it or have much that you, at least for me personally, didn't like. Like, I don't know. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
I I almost have to agree with 100% what you just said because I think, and I'm not faulting you by saying it either, but even like the whole speeding up the thing with Jeffries hanging off the building, you know, it is. I mean, it's like grasping for straws
Yeah.
because there isn't a lot in this movie to hate. I mean,
Yeah.
well, there's not a whole lot to the entire movie to begin with. I mean, it takes place in an apartment complex. Most
Mhm.
of the movie in one apartment. There aren't a whole. I mean, there's a lot of extras and all of that, but there's what, 6 main characters in the whole movie. I mean, there's not a lot. I mean, so there's really not a whole lot to pick and choose something to hate from. If everything's on point, you're going to end up with a movie like this one that gets a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes and 95% on an audience score. And it's just the brilliance of what Alfred Hitchcock does. I don't care if it's him working with Jimmy Stewart, if it's him working with Tony Perkins or Vivian Lee or any of that. It just Hitchcock is just brilliant in my opinion, and I personally believe Hitchcock walked so that directors like Spielberg, Coppola, on and on and on, so on. I'm not going to list them all because we'd be here all day. But Hitchcock walked so everybody else nowadays could run.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So, and most of them will tell you the same thing. Even the old school directors, they you know are for our generation, the old time classic directors like Spielberg and all of that will tell you the same thing. Hitchcock, Hitchcock, Hitchcock. Because when you're an artist like Hitchcock is and you completely reinvent the way that things are done, that's what makes you a visionary. And at the end of the day, Alfred Hitchcock is a true masterful visionary, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
don't have to agree with me, but you would be wrong.
Well, and I
So,
love how detail oriented he is in all of his movies, and I think that's part of the reason why they are so good is because his obsessive level of detail, and I think that you see that in this apartment complex. This was all built for this movie. And
Mhm.
so the fact that each apartment is placed the way that it is and the way that each apartment looks and down to the costuming and the lighting, like everything was so intentional and everything is strategic and has meaning. And I think that that just goes to what you were saying about him being this visionary director. You know, he was unwilling to settle for anything less than his vision, anything less than perfection, which made him difficult to work with, but it produced these really great movies like Rear Window that are still stunning to look at. Like this looks beautiful visually, and it was just a joy to be in this apartment complex trying to solve this murder because everything
Mhm.
looked so visually interesting.
I didn't realize how unconventional he was until I saw the um, Anthony Hopkins performance
Mhm.
in that. I don't know if you'd seen that movie or not, but
Yep.
um, for the listeners who haven't, Anthony Hopkins plays Alfred Hitchcock at the time that he's acquiring the rights and writing the story for Psycho, or writing the screenplay for Psycho. Um, it paints a very vivid picture as to just how unconventional and the manic genius that I mean, everything that he had to go through personally, professionally, on set, off set, whatever, just to make a low budget movie, which happens to be, what many people consider to be one of the greatest horror movies of all time as well. But, you know, again, I digress. But it just goes to show exactly what Alfred Hitchcock was all about. And um, as a personal Hitchcock fan, I would highly recommend people, if you are curious about that aspect of his life, go pick the movie up and check it out because I enjoyed it and I didn't think I was going to. So, um, let's see. So, kind of sort of a tongue in cheek moment that we had towards the beginning of the movie was, I think, Hitchcock was kind of sort of poking fun at the whole concept of marriage with
Mhm.
with like the relationship between um, Lisa and Jeffries.
Yep.
And I don't remember where I was going with that question now. Huh? Go figure.
That's all right.
This is
But
what
I
happens. This is what happens when you don't script out every one of your questions. One will pop into your head, and then all of a sudden,
But I do love how much of this movie is centered on relationships because obviously you have Lisa and Jeffries and that tension,
mhm,
you know, but then all of these other characters though are in some way defined by a relationship. You know, Thorwald murders his wife and
I think you're picking up what I was putting down.
I got you. But yeah, they're all relationship focused, and you have Miss Lonely Hearts who wants a date and is just in her apartment. You have Miss Torso who is entertaining all of these suitors. You have the pianist who is lonely and then starts attracting people to him. You know, like, and then you have the
Mhm,
married couple who sleeps outside on their bed. So I love how all of these background characters, even Stella, she references her husband too throughout the movie. And
mhm,
so even though Jeffries and Lisa's relationship is not the main focus of the movie, all of these other characters, oh, you have the newlyweds too, who are locked up in their apartment with the drapes closed. So all
yeah.
of these other characters are just this constant reminder of this tension in Jeffrey's and Lisa's relationship. And so I just thought that that was such a smart way of keeping that focus on their relationship without actually having these like define the relationship moments every 30 minutes or so. So it's just again these really intentional choices that Hitchcock made that help make this movie work as well as it does and make it into this cohesive whole.
Well, because I think at the beginning of the movie when it's brought up that, um, you know, you need to get married, the nurse brings up the whole, "You need to get married. She's the perfect woman for you," and this, that, and the other thing. It's almost like it would have been easy to just have one of those sit down and define the relationship type moments,
Mhm.
and Hitchcock didn't do that. He's
Yeah.
like, "No, my brain does not work that way. I'm going to screw with shit and twist it around and make it some weird mind trip that you're going to go on. And at the end of the movie, you'll get what you get and don't throw a fit." So,
Yeah. And I love that even at the end that we don't really know where they stand. They're still together,
mhm.
but we don't know what their next step is going to be, and I think that that's also very smart, 'cause a different ending to this movie would, like, end in a wedding, and that would just feel cheap and not make sense for these characters. So we could still
Yeah.
imagine that obviously they love each other, but there's still probably some of that tension there, and they're trying to meet each other in the middle. We just don't know what that will look like going forward.
So, I mean, this movie is, like we said, almost 70 years old. So,
Mhm.
um, I kind of have mixed feelings with saying what I'm about ready to say, but I want to make sure I say it though, because it's something that is very Hitchcockian with the fact that, you get the whole throughout the entire movie, you question back and forth, you know, is Jeffrey's stories the truth or blah, 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 blah. And then you finally get to the moment where everything's unfolding and yeah, okay, he did kill his wife. And then he shows up to throw Jeffries out the freaking window. And, he does. And you get everybody running in fast camera speed to the scene to ultimately be there as Jeffries falls out the window and ultimately ends up breaking his other leg as well.
Yep.
So the last time you see Lisa and Jeffries together, because you have this whole moment in the beginning with the whole probably him dealing with being an insomniac and not sleeping in the bed and sleeping in his chair and all of that and getting lectured for it. And then the last time you see the two of them together, he's I don't remember if he was in the chair or what, but he's sleeping with two
Mhm.
broken legs,
Yep.
a big ass smile on his face,
Yep.
and Lisa's laying there next to him reading a copy of some fashion magazine or whatever.
Mhm.
So, it's kind of sort of yeah, like you said, you get kind of sort of a happy ending, but you're left with the big question mark in the back of your head, you know, because you don't get the whole like you said, they easily could have gone to, the two of them standing at the front of a church hand in hand saying I do. But again, I appreciate the fact he didn't go that way. He like, I'm going to give you a happy ending, but I'm not going to give you all of it because in this short period of time, the little bit of information we get in the beginning of the movie, he, Jeffries is probably about a week ish away from getting out of his
Mhm.
cast.
Yep.
So all of everything that transpires in this movie happens within probably a week time period. So to me, if they had gone all the way to, da 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 da, da, then that kind of sort of cheapens the movie
Yep. It's too
because
much.
yeah, that you I very much could see that happening at the end of the day,
Mhm.
but in the amount of time frame that we have for this movie, that's not how things naturally progress.
Yep.
I get it. I've seen enough TV shows on TV, 90 Day Fiance, where, you know, in a short period of time people get married. 90 days is still not a week though, people.
Yep.
So, but I mean, it, I've actually seen interviews with like uh showrunners before that will like wrap up a series finale for a TV show, but they don't give you that happily ever after ending. And that's because at the end of the day, things don't always just naturally progress to a happily ever after ending. Sometimes it takes longer than what we have to give you, but
Yep.
at the end of the day, things don't always have to end with a nice pink bow on top.
Yeah, and this movie really threads that needle well because it's such a
Mhm.
satisfying conclusion that makes sense for these characters, and I love that Hitchcock understood his scope, and he kept it narrow, you know? We are
Yes.
confined to this one location, primarily a wheelchair in this apartment, for a
Mhm.
week, and that's it, and I think sometimes filmmakers fall into the trap of not having enough constraints, and so then they try to do too much, and then the movie can end up being a bit of a mess, and so I feel like this is a great example of how constraints can actually help make your movie better, and this is just one of those examples.
Exactly. So you summed up everything that I said in a nice little pink bow. I kind of sort of went as Stephen King esque with my description as I could, which means
It's great,
very incredibly wordy. So
but it's great. Words are good.
I love words. I love writing words and I love reading words. So um, I'm trying to think of there. Did you have anything else that you want to make sure we cover before we get to our rating and review portion of the show?
Yeah, one of the things that stood out to me about this movie, like watching it again, it's probably been like 10 years or so since I watched this. Uh, and I was impressed at how both Lisa and Stella are so integral to to the plot. You know, if
Mm,
they weren't in this, the plot wouldn't happen. And so I loved how much agency Lisa has in particularly. She's not just some like vapid, shallow fashionista lady, but there's actually some like real meat to her. And Grace Kelly does a great job in that role, of course. But
mm.
both her and Stella push back against Jeffries, but then they eventually come around to him like we talked about, and then they help him in this and they know when to challenge him, they know when to support him. And in even when they go and dig up the flower bed, they're like, "Nah, you're wrong. We're gonna go do this." So I loved how important they were and how well-rounded they were as characters, and they are really good, balances to Jeffries throughout this whole adventure.
Well, and just in the physical sense of their presence, without them,
Yep,
the story doesn't progress
yep,
because, okay, how is Jeffries going to get out of his apartment to go and do the investigating that needs to be done to
mhm,
put two and two together? I mean, I guess you could probably lazily just throw in things, you know, occurring happenstance,
mhm.
but at the end of the day, though, that is going to completely ruin the movie that you've created. And we've talked about it, just how detailed oriented Hitchcock is. And he definitely does not strike me as somebody who is going to, in any stretch of the imagination, half ass.
Yeah,
It's
definitely
not
not.
his masterpiece. Whether it's Rear Window, whether it's Vertigo, whether it's Strangers on a Train, Dial M for Murder, Psycho, whatever, he's going to every time I he gets in the director's chair and makes this movie, whether he has to be an asshole dictator or not, which evidently from time to time he was, but he's still going to completely and thoroughly create his vision of the story that is presented to him. So, hats off to him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is a great movie.
It really is. And that statement alone is actually probably a good segue into I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and let you sum up your case for the entire movie and go ahead and rate the movie out of 5 stars if you would like to.
Yeah, Rear Window is such a thrilling movie and plays on, some of our human tendencies, our curiosity and our the way that we struggle with confinement, our imagination, but it also highlights the importance of relationships. And it's a thriller and a mystery, and it looks great all in one bow with, the typical Hitchcock flair. So I think Rear Window is it's obviously a classic for a reason, and, it's top tier Hitchcock. So, I don't know, I how do you not give this 5 stars? It's a
Yeah.
great movie.
Um, I literally could echo everything that you just said and so much more. Um, this cast is
Oh, so good.
incredible. Um, obviously, if you don't know who James Stewart is, Jimmy Stewart, then you've been living under a rock because this wasn't his only Hitchcock movie that he worked with Hitchcock on. He also starred in a little Christmas movie that, by the time that this airs, we discussed a couple weeks ago during our Christmas Day double feature. It's a Wonderful Life. So, again, if you haven't checked out this guy's work, I highly recommend you do it. Then, on top of it, once you step away from Stewart, now you've got Grace Kelly to look at, who is an amazing, incredible actress, award winning just for this movie alone, let alone anything that she's ever won for anything else she did. Um, and Raymond Burr and a whole wealth of people that have helped create this image. And then at the same time, you've got the puppet master himself pulling the puppet strings, being Alfred Hitchcock. You know, the fact that you literally can go back, like I said, this movie had a $1 million budget. And luckily for them, I would guess the majority of that went to cast because
Yeah.
they didn't have a whole lot of elaborate costumes or elaborate sets they needed. So, yeah, I would assume probably the majority of that went to the cast fees. But, they clearly created a masterpiece where not only did they make back their money, but they made $36 million more on top of it. So, um, the story is incredible from minute one all the way through till almost 2 hours into it when the final credits roll. It's insane. Um, yeah, I don't generally, and we've talked about this before on the show, just throw out 5 out of 5s. I used to in the beginning, but Amanda and I kind of got a little bit more stringent with our criteria for a 5. But at the end of the day, this is nothing less than a 5. It can't be anything. I mean, I could probably be creative and ingenious and go 8 out of 5 at this point because
Nice.
that's how much I love this movie. And I am excited by the fact I get a lot of people who have asked to come on the show that want to do like more current type stuff. And I'm not faulting people for that by any stretch of the imagination. So please don't think I am. But when we connected and you gave me that short little list of movies that
Mhm.
you were interested in talking about, and I saw Rear Window come up on that list,
Yep.
I was like, yes. I'm like, I've been because we've only really had one chance to talk about Alfred Hitchcock on the show, and it was the obvious choice because
Mhm.
it is his most popular work of all time, and the episode was obviously on Psycho. But the fact that you wanted gave this as a possibility,
Yep.
literally within like a week of you picking this movie, somebody else said that they booked a recording for this show and they picked a Hitchcock movie as well.
Wow.
So coming up
Awesome.
here in the next few weeks, we will be recording an episode on North by Northwest.
Mm. So fun.
Yeah, I am excited by the fact that that Hitchcock door is opening, and we're gonna kick it the rest of the way open, and we're gonna get some stuff talked about because now, like Amanda wants to talk about Vertigo. I'm gonna
Oh,
sit down and make
yes.
make her talk about the birds. She hates that movie, by the way. That movie creeps her
Oh.
out.
Oh, that'll be a great conversation.
I'm gonna make her talk about it. She made me watch Halloween Ends. She has to watch the freaking birds.
There you go. It's only fair.
So quid pro. Well, it's not quid pro quo, but it is what it is. So, um, this was a lot of fun. Actually,
Mhm.
I really enjoyed this. And you know what? Before I even get to, normally I wait until we get to you know your stuff at the end in the conclusion. But I'm just going to rip the band-aid off and say you are 100%, 100,000% welcome to come back anytime you want.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm
We can.
happy to come back. We got lots of other classic movies to talk about. We could talk about Hitchcock some more too. We can keep that train rolling.
You know what? I would be willing to wager an invitation that I would actually like to get you and me, and possibly if I can get it arranged, Amanda on the same episode, and pick a classic Hitchcock movie and go down that road
Yeah, that would be great. I'm down.
because I think you and she have a lot of the same viewpoints, and you're very intelligent with the way that you convey yourself. I really would like to sit down and watch the two of you have a discussion
Mhm.
like that over whatever whether it's Vertigo or whatever, I don't care. But definitely, we have to have you back on.
Yeah, let's do
I
it. That would be fun.
Even if it doesn't have to be Hitchcock, I think the two of you meeting and getting to know each other as well, I think you guys could have a lot of fun talking as well. So we'll definitely have to go down that road.
Yeah, absolutely. Love having conversations about movies. So this is
Me too.
this is my bread and butter right here.
Well, then let me conclude all of that with you are have an open invitation anytime you want. So anytime you have an idea, you know how to get a hold of me. You have my email
Yep.
address. You can shoot me an email and say, "Hey, would you be willing to do?" And the general rule of thumb on this show is no movie gets denied. So if you've got a movie that you'd like to do, we'll do it.
Sounds great.
So really quick, so we can wrap it all up. Um, as always, I have to say thank you to the listeners for being here each and every week. You guys are amazing. Um, and really, before I get into what's coming up really quick on An Evening at the Movies, where can the listeners find your two podcasts?
Yeah, you can find movie conversations, Movies and Us, wherever you get your podcasts. And then we also have a TV podcast. So we review a season of TV episode by episode, and that is TV and Us. So really easy. Movies and Us, TV and Us. And then if you want to follow us on social media, Movies and Us Pod on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, all the places. So follow us and let's talk more movies.
Oh, I promise you, you and I will be talking more movies.
Love it.
um, so this episode is dropping for release the middle of January. So, with that said, we have coming up on the schedule our episode where we talk about Galaxy Quest. And then in February, we are going to spend a month talking about Black cinema. And we're going to kick that off with Amanda and Harvey and I sitting down and talking about the Spike Lee movie Bamboozled. And then, as well, coming up on February 10th, we are doing a live episode of An Evening at the Movies. Why are we going live? Because that is the day that we turn 3 years old. And on top of it, that is the day that episode will be our not 100th, but 200th episode. So
Woohoo!
I am excited for that. And we are inviting anybody who wants to come and be a part of the episode. You're definitely more than welcome to come on and be a part of the episode. If you don't want to be a part of the episode and just want to watch and comment along as we celebrate, you're more than welcome to do that as well. The live streams will be posted on all of the social medias, so you can watch as well. So, with all that said, that was a lot, but as you all know, not as much as I normally do. So, but again, thank you, Sarah, for being here. This was a amazing amount of fun. I look forward to many, many more episodes with you. And at the end of the day, guys, we hope you guys all come back for An Evening at the Movies. We will see you guys next week.
An Evening at the Movies is a proud member of the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network. Other shows in the network include Masturbators, The Sip List, Crushgasm, Love is Black, Men Are the Prize, Crime Rewind, and Literature Reapers. You can find out all about our shows and more at idnmtrpodcastnetwork.com. Happy listening.